Welcome. Before we step inside one of America's most talked about mansions, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? And if you enjoy deeply researched stories that uncover the hidden truth behind famous places, make sure you subscribe, because a lot of real effort goes into digging through historical records, old documents, and forgotten accounts to bring stories like this to light. Today's story isn't about politics or headlines. It's about power, secrecy, and the dark past buried inside. Mar-a-Lago did not begin as a symbol of controversy or power. It began as a dream born from obsession, grief, and an almost unnatural desire to be remembered forever. In the early 1920s, when Palm Beach was still a quiet stretch of sand and palm trees, a woman named Marjorie Meriwether Post set her eyes on building something that would outlive her name, her wealth, and even her era. She was already one of the richest women in America, heir to the Post's cereal fortune, but money alone wasn't what drove her. What she wanted was legacy. Something permanent, something untouchable, something that would place her among history's elite. Marjorie chose a narrow strip of land between the Atlantic Ocean and Lake Worth, a place locals warned her against. The land was unstable, exposed to storms, and considered impractical for a massive estate. But that only strengthened her resolve. She envisioned a palace that would stand between two waters, symbolizing power balanced between worlds, public and private, wealth and isolation, life and memory. She named it Mar-a-Lago, Spanish for say to lake, as if the house itself were meant to bridge realms. Construction began in 1924 and lasted nearly 3 years. The scale was unprecedented. Over 600 workers were brought in. Materials were imported from Europe: Spanish tiles, Venetian chandeliers, Gothic stonework, and antique iron gates that had once guarded estates centuries older than America itself. Marjorie spared no expense, but she also demanded control over every detail. Workers later said she would walk the site late at night, alone, inspecting rooms by lantern light, whispering to herself as if rehearsing conversations that had not yet happened. But behind the grandeur was something darker. Marjorie had lost her father at a young age, endured multiple failed marriages, and lived with a quiet fear of being forgotten. Friends described her as generous yet distant, warm yet calculating. Mar-a-Lago became more than a home. It became a monument to permanence. She insisted the walls be thicker than necessary, the foundations deeper than required. She once told an architect, "I don't want this house to age. I want it to endure." That choice would later fuel rumors that the mansion felt less like a residence and more like a fortress. When Mar-a-Lago was completed in 1927, it was unlike anything America had seen. It had 126 rooms, secret passageways for servants, and vast halls designed not for comfort but for spectacle. Guests were stunned, but also unsettled. Some claimed the mansion felt strangely quiet, even during large gatherings. Others reported getting lost inside, despite clear layouts. A few guests quietly declined invitations after spending a night there, offering vague excuses but never explaining why. Marjorie hosted powerful figures, politicians, royalty, industrialists, yet she never fully opened herself to them. She remained watchful, always observing. Servants later claimed she insisted certain rooms remain locked at all times, even from senior staff. One room in particular, rumored to be her private retreat, was said to contain no mirrors, only dark wood walls and heavy curtains drawn even during the day. When asked why, she reportedly replied, "Some reflections are unnecessary." As the years passed, Mar-a-Lago became less a social hub and more a personal stronghold. The Great Depression hit, fortunes shifted, and Palm Beach society evolved. Yet Marjorie held on, pouring more money into upkeep than logic would suggest. It was as if abandoning the mansion meant abandoning herself. She once confided to a close friend that the house listens and remembers, words that were brushed off as poetic, but later echoed by staff who claimed the estate felt aware. By the 1940s, Marjorie's intentions for Mar-a-Lago took a surprising turn. She announced that the mansion was never meant to be just her home. She claimed she had built it for the nation, as a future presidential retreat, grander than Camp David, a place where world leaders could meet under American skies. In 1947, she donated Mar-a-Lago to the US government, along with a substantial endowment for its care. But the government rejected it. Officials cited overwhelming maintenance costs, structural impracticalities, and security concerns. Behind closed doors, there were other worries. The layout was too complex, the location too exposed, and the building too strange. Mar-a-Lago was returned to Marjorie's foundation, its purpose suddenly unclear. For a woman who had built her legacy in stone, this rejection cut deeply. Marjorie Merriweather Post died in 1973, but her mansion did not fade with her. Instead, it lingered empty, costly, unwanted, and whispering with unresolved purpose. The house that was meant to secure her place in history now stood as a question mark, waiting for someone else to claim it. And that is how Mar-a-Lago truly began. Not as a political symbol, not as a luxury club, but as the deeply personal creation of a woman who refused to be forgotten, and a mansion built with such intensity that it seemed to absorb the will of its creator. Everything that followed, the controversy, the power, the shadows, grew from that origin. As Mar-a-Lago entered its early years, it quickly became more than just an extravagant private residence. It became a stage where America's elite gathered, observed, and quietly competed. During the late 1920s and 1930s, Palm Beach was transforming into a playground for the ultra-wealthy, and Mar-a-Lago stood at the center of that world like a crown jewel. Invitations to the estate were not merely social gestures, they were signals of status. To be welcomed through its iron gates meant you had arrived among the most powerful people in the country. Marjorie Merriweather Post curated her guest list with extreme care. Industrial tycoons, foreign dignitaries, European royalty in exile, and influential politicians passed through the mansion's grand halls. Lavish dinners were held beneath soaring ceilings, orchestras played in marble-floored silence, and conversations whispered in corners often carried more weight than official meetings held elsewhere. Deals were discussed, alliances hinted at, and reputations quietly shaped, all while servants moved silently through hidden corridors, designed to keep the illusion of effortlessness intact. Yet, despite the luxury, there was something unusual about how guests described their time there. Unlike other estates where indulgence and celebration dominated the atmosphere, Mar-a-Lago felt restrained, formal, watchful. Guests later recalled feeling as though they were being observed even when alone. The vast rooms swallowed sound, and laughter often died out faster than expected. It was a place of power, yes, but also of quiet calculation. Marjorie herself rarely relaxed during these gatherings. She floated through the rooms with composed grace, always listening more than she spoke. She seated guests strategically, separating rivals and pairing potential allies. Her dinners were less about pleasure and more about influence. Those who underestimated her intelligence quickly learned that she understood politics, finance, and human ambition far better than she let on. In many ways, Mar-a-Lago became a soft power hub, a place where decisions weren't made outright but carefully nudged into existence. Foreign visitors, especially European aristocrats displaced by war and revolution, found the mansion both comforting and unsettling. To them, Mar-a-Lago felt closer to an old-world palace than an American home. Some even remarked that it felt timeless, detached from the chaos reshaping the world outside its gates. During the lead up to World War II, diplomats and military advisors quietly passed through Palm Beach, and rumors later suggested that sensitive conversations took place at Mar-a-Lago under the cover of social visits. But the estate's growing importance also brought tension. Not everyone felt welcome. Some prominent figures declined invitations after a single visit, citing vague discomfort. Staff noticed that certain guests requested room changes late at night, claiming they couldn't sleep. Others complained of strange drafts, unexplained noises, or the unsettling feeling of being followed through the halls. These accounts were dismissed publicly, but privately, Marjorie took note, not with concern, but with an odd sense of satisfaction. The house, she believed, had a presence, and presence commanded respect. As the Great Depression reshaped America, many wealthy families retreated or downsized. Mar-a-Lago did neither. Instead, it became even more exclusive. While other estates fell quiet, Post continued hosting select gatherings, reinforcing the mansion's image as a sanctuary for those untouched by economic collapse. This only deepened its mystique. To outsiders, Mar-a-Lago symbolized excess. To insiders, it symbolized survival, proof that some institutions, like some people, were simply too powerful to fall. By the early 1940s, the mansion's role among America's elite began to shift. It was no longer just a social venue. It was being discussed as a national asset. Marjorie increasingly framed Mar-a-Lago as a place suited for leadership, diplomacy, and historic decision-making. She spoke openly of its destiny, suggesting it had been built not just for her guests, but for the nation itself. Those words unsettled some and inspired others. The idea that a private mansion could carry such weight was unusual, but Mar-a-Lago had always defied convention. Behind closed doors, however, cracks were forming. The elite world that once embraced the mansion began to move on. New money favored modernity over grandeur. Political power shifted away from Palm Beach, and the very exclusivity that had once elevated Mar-a-Lago now isolated it. The house remained impressive, but it was no longer essential. Still, those early decades left an imprint that never faded. Mar-a-Lago had been a meeting ground for influence, ambition, and unspoken power. It had hosted people who shaped industries, governments, and global outcomes, often without leaving any official record. That invisible history clung to the walls, embedding itself into the mansion's identity. And long after the guests stopped coming, that legacy remained. Because Mar-a-Lago wasn't just a place where elites gathered, it was a place where power learned how to sit quietly, wait patiently, and endure. By the late 1940s and into the 1950s, Mar-a-Lago entered one of the most ironic and troubling phases of its existence. The mansion that had once dazzled America's elite, hosted royalty, and symbolized unmatched wealth, was suddenly unwanted. After Marjorie Meriwether Post's dream of turning the estate into a presidential retreat collapsed, the property became a burden rather than a blessing. What had been built to endure now faced a slow, humiliating decline. The first crack was financial reality. Mar-a-Lago was breathtaking, but it was also impractical. Maintenance costs were staggering. The sheer size of the mansion demanded a large staff, constant repairs, and round-the-clock upkeep. Salt air from the ocean corroded metal and stone. Storms battered the roof and windows. Even with an endowment left by post, the cost of simply keeping the mansion standing outweighed its usefulness. Wealthy buyers admired it, toured it, and then quietly walked away. Potential purchasers quickly realized that Mar-a-Lago was not a home, it was an institution. Living there meant inheriting its past, its scale, and its expectations. Heating it, securing it, staffing it, and maintaining it felt closer to managing a palace than owning a residence. Several real estate developers considered converting it into luxury apartments or a hotel, but the logistics were overwhelming. Zoning restrictions, preservation concerns, and the mansion's unusual layout made redevelopment nearly impossible. Then came the broken promises. When Marjorie Merriweather Post donated Mar-a-Lago to the US government, she did so believing it would become a lasting symbol of national leadership. When the government returned it, citing costs and security risks, it quietly shattered that vision. The mansion's identity was left in limbo, too grand to ignore, too difficult to use. It was neither fully private nor truly public, and that uncertainty scared off serious interest. As years passed, the estate sat mostly empty. Rooms once filled with music and conversation echoed with silence. Curtains were drawn. Wings of the mansion were closed off entirely to save money. Former staff described an unsettling stillness settling over the property, as if the house itself were waiting for something that never arrived. Even caretakers avoided certain sections at night, citing strange acoustics, sudden cold drafts, and the persistent feeling of being watched. Social relevance faded as well. Palm Beach society changed. New wealth favored modern, minimalist estates over European-style grandeur. Mar-a-Lago began to feel outdated, too heavy with history, too tied to an old vision of power. What once made it impressive now made it awkward. Invitations stopped coming. High-profile events disappeared. The mansion's name shifted from symbol of prestige to cautionary tale. By the 1960s and 1970s, Mar-a-Lago was often described as too big to sell and too expensive to keep. It was a paradox priceless in reputation, yet nearly worthless in function. Newspapers occasionally mentioned it as a decaying relic of excess. Some speculated it would eventually be demolished, its materials sold off piece by piece. Others feared it would rot away, swallowed by neglect and storms. Even after Marjorie Post's death, the uncertainty continued. Her foundation struggled to justify holding onto the property. Each year drained more money. Each year without purpose deepened the sense that Mar-a-Lago had lost its place in the world. The mansion had been designed to command attention, but now it existed in quiet embarrassment, a giant reminder that even the grandest dreams can collapse under their own weight. And yet, something about Mar-a-Lago refused to disappear. Despite its financial ruin and social abandonment, the mansion endured. It stood intact when logic said it shouldn't. Storms came and went. Markets rose and fell. Owners changed hands around it, but Mar-a-Lago remained, waiting. That period of rejection and near-forgotten status would become crucial to its future, because it was during this time when no one wanted it, when its purpose was broken, that the mansion became vulnerable to reinvention. The house that once symbolized unreachable elite power was about to be claimed by someone willing to see opportunity where others saw only failure. And in that moment of abandonment, Mar-a-Lago's story took the sharpest turn of all. As Mar-a-Lago slipped into years of uncertainty and quiet neglect, a different kind of story began to take shape. One not found in financial records or newspaper listings, but in whispers passed between staff, caretakers, and the few guests who still stepped inside its walls. This was when rumors started to cling to the mansion, not as spectacle, but as unease. People didn't just talk about what Mar-a-Lago was anymore. They talked about how it felt. Former staff members were among the first to describe things that didn't quite add up. The mansion had been built with servant corridors, concealed staircases, and service doors hidden behind decorative panels, common in grand estates of the era, but unusually extensive at Mar-a-Lago. Some hallways led nowhere. Some doors opened into narrow spaces that felt unfinished, almost forgotten. New staff often got lost during their first weeks, even with maps. A few claimed certain passageways seemed to shift, leading to different rooms depending on the time of day. There were rooms rarely mentioned in official descriptions, locked chambers that caretakers were instructed not to enter unless absolutely necessary. One former groundskeeper claimed there was a windowless room deep within the structure that absorbed sound completely. Voices dropped into silence the moment you stepped inside. Another recalled a narrow staircase hidden behind a tapestry that descended into a storage area no one could explain, filled with old furniture covered in dust and salt residue as if it had been dragged in from the sea. Night staff spoke most freely, often years later. Once they no longer worked there, they described lights turning on in empty wings of the mansion, only to be off again minutes later. Doors that had been locked during evening rounds were found open by morning. Footsteps echoed across marble floors long after everyone had gone to bed. When questioned, supervisors dismissed it as settling wood or old wiring, but the explanations never fully satisfied those who experienced it. One persistent rumor involved the main ballroom. Caretakers claimed that late at night, the temperature in the room would suddenly drop, regardless of the weather. Sound behaved strangely there, whispers carried too far, while loud voices seemed swallowed by the space. A few people said they felt dizzy after standing there alone, as if the room pulled something out of them. These accounts were never recorded officially, but they were repeated often enough to become part of the mansion's unofficial lore. There were also stories about hidden rooms tied directly to Marjorie Merriweather Post herself. Some believed she had private chambers used for reflection and solitude, sealed off after her death. Staff were warned never to disturb certain areas, even during renovations. One maintenance worker claimed that when a wall panel was removed during repairs, it revealed a small enclosed space containing nothing but an old chair facing the wall, no window, no decoration, just stillness. The panel was quickly replaced, and no report was filed. Guests, too, noticed oddities. A handful of high-profile visitors reportedly cut stays short, citing discomfort without elaboration. Some complained of insomnia, others of headaches, or a persistent feeling of being watched. A guest once remarked that the mansion felt too aware, a phrase that resurfaced more than once in private conversations. Even during daytime events, there was an undercurrent of tension, as though the house remembered every footstep and refused to forget. What made these rumors more powerful was the lack of denial. Management never addressed them directly. There were no public statements, no official explanations. Instead, silence allowed speculation to grow. Over time, stories blended fact and imagination, but the emotional consistency remained. Mar-a-Lago was not just old, it was heavy. Not haunted in the theatrical sense, but burdened, layered, saturated with the presence of those who had passed through it. As the mansion prepared for its next transformation, these whispers did not disappear. They traveled with the building into its new identity, resurfacing whenever renovations exposed old walls or sealed corridors. Workers renovating decades later still reported the same sensations: sudden chills, unexplained noises, an overwhelming sense of being observed while alone. Whether these stories were the result of architecture, psychology, or something harder to name didn't matter. What mattered was that Mar-a-Lago had developed a reputation that went beyond wealth or controversy. It was a place with hidden spaces and unspoken rules, a mansion that didn't give itself up easily. And by the time a new owner stepped forward to claim it, Mar-a-Lago wasn't just a property anymore. It was a place already crowded with secrets. By the late 1970s, Mar-a-Lago stood at a crossroads that few outside Palm Beach truly understood. What had once been a glittering symbol of old American wealth was quietly becoming a liability. The cost of maintaining the massive estate had grown staggering. Repairs to the aging structure, hurricane damage, outdated systems, and staffing needs drained resources faster than any charitable or private owner could justify. For years, the mansion hovered on the edge of irrelevance, admired from a distance but avoided up close. It was beautiful, yes, but it was also burdensome. The U.S. government, which had inherited Mar-a-Lago after Marjorie Merriweather Post's death, under the condition it be used as a presidential retreat, quickly discovered the reality she may have underestimated. The upkeep costs were astronomical. Security alone was a nightmare. The salty ocean air corroded fixtures and stone. Storms battered the coastline year after year. After less than a decade, the government quietly walked away, returning the property to the Post Foundation. That moment marked the beginning of Mar-a-Lago's most vulnerable era. What followed was a period of near collapse. The estate struggled to find a purpose that matched its scale. Potential buyers were deterred by the cost. Developers saw risk, not opportunity. Some even suggested demolishing parts of the structure to salvage the land value alone. The idea that such a grand mansion could simply fade into obscurity or be erased entirely was no longer unthinkable. Locals began to refer to it as the white elephant on the ocean, impressive but impractical. Then came the purchase that changed everything. When Donald Trump acquired Mar-a-Lago in the mid-1980s, the reaction was mixed and immediate. Some viewed it as a bold rescue of a dying landmark. Others saw it as an intrusion, new money stepping into a space once reserved for old-world discretion. Trump didn't just buy the property, he redefined it. Instead of restoring it quietly, he amplified it. Instead of keeping it exclusive in the traditional sense, he made it visible, loud even. The transformation was physical, cultural, and symbolic. Mar-a-Lago became a private club, opening its gates, selectively, to members who could afford access. This move alone shattered Palm Beach norms. The mansion was no longer a dormant relic. It was alive again, hosting events, Weddings, galas, and gatherings that drew attention and criticism in equal measure. For some, it was revitalization. For others, it was sacrilege. As the years passed, Mar-a-Lago's identity shifted further. It became inseparable from Trump himself. The mansion was no longer just a historic estate. It was a brand, a stage, and eventually a power center. When Trump entered politics, Mar-a-Lago followed him into the spotlight. What had once been an architectural curiosity became a global headline. Diplomacy, controversy, and spectacle collided under its tiled roof. With this new role came a different kind of scrutiny. Journalists dissected its history. Critics questioned its use. Supporters embraced it as a symbol of defiance against establishment norms. Every event held there carried political weight, whether intended or not. The mansion became a place where private space and public consequence blurred beyond recognition. What's striking is how complete the transformation was. Mar-a-Lago went from a property no one wanted to one everyone argued about. From near abandonment to constant surveillance. From quiet decay to non-stop relevance. Few buildings in American history have undergone such a dramatic reversal of fortune, not through preservation alone, but through controversy. Yet even as its modern identity took shape, the past never fully loosened its grip. The old rooms remained. The hidden corridors still existed. The layers of history, from post's ambition to government rejection to private reinvention, stacked atop one another. Mar-a-Lago became a place where eras collided rather than replaced each other. Today, its image depends entirely on who is looking. To some, it represents revival and success. To others, excess and division. But no matter the perspective, one truth remains unavoidable. Mar-a-Lago did not simply survive decline, it was reborn through conflict. Its survival wasn't quiet or graceful. It was loud, polarizing, and permanent. And that is what makes its transformation so unsettling and fascinating. A mansion that refused to disappear didn't just come back to life. It came back changed, carrying its past into every modern moment. Mar-a-Lago didn't escape history. It became part of it. Even now, long after its original builders, benefactors, and early guests are gone, Mar-a-Lago continues to provoke a reaction that few historic properties can match. It is not simply remembered, it is argued over, defended, criticized, and constantly reinterpreted. The mansion's past refuses to stay in the past, because every chapter of its history feeds directly into the emotions people feel about it today. Mar-a-Lago doesn't sit quietly as a museum piece. It lives in the present, and that is exactly why fascination and fear continue to surround it. Part of this enduring pull comes from contradiction. Mar-a-Lago was built as a private winter retreat, meant to be beautiful but restrained, exclusive but refined. Over time, it became a symbol of excess power and visibility. Those opposing identities never fully resolved. Instead, they exist together within the same walls. Walk through the estate, and you're moving through layers of intention that clash with one another. Old, money elegance brushing up against modern spectacle. Silence pressed against constant attention. The mansion also occupies a rare space in American culture, where architecture, wealth, and politics intersect. Buildings tied to power often become emotionally charged, and Mar-a-Lago is no exception. Its rooms have hosted quiet conversations that never reached the public, followed decades later by meetings scrutinized by the entire world. That shift alone gives the mansion an unsettling quality, as though the walls themselves learned how to keep secrets and then were forced to expose them. For many people, the fear isn't supernatural, it's symbolic. Mar-a-Lago represents how power can accumulate in private spaces beyond public reach. Its gates, its membership rules, its guarded corridors all reinforce the idea that something important is happening just out of sight. Even when nothing is happening, the suggestion remains. That sense of exclusion breeds suspicion, and suspicion fuels myth. At the same time, fascination grows from the mansion's refusal to be neutral. Few places inspire such polarized reactions. Some view it as a triumph of preservation and reinvention. Others see it as a distortion of history, a once elegant estate turned into a lightning rod for controversy. That emotional divide keeps Mar-a-Lago permanently relevant. Every debate, every headline, every rumor reactivates its story, ensuring it is never fully settled. There is also the weight of accumulated human presence. Decades of staff, guests, dignitaries, and workers have passed through the same halls. Each left something behind, not physically, but atmospherically. People often describe historic buildings as feeling heavy, and Mar-a-Lago carries that sensation intensely, not because of tragedy alone, but because of significance. Decisions made within its walls mattered, sometimes quietly, sometimes enormously. Even its location contributes to the unease. Sitting between ocean and lake, isolated yet visible, the mansion feels suspended rather than grounded. Storms approach it head-on. Salt air eats at its stone. Nature constantly tests its permanence. That vulnerability, paired with its grandeur, creates a tension that never resolves. It looks invincible, yet it's always under threat, a metaphor many find hard to ignore. The legends persist because they fill the gaps that official history leaves behind. When answers are incomplete, stories step in. Whether it's whispers of strange behavior, rumors of hidden spaces, or simple discomfort felt by visitors, these narratives thrive because the mansion itself offers no closure. Mar-a-Lago doesn't explain itself. It simply exists, daring people to project meaning onto it. In the end, the reason Mar-a-Lago still fuels debate isn't just what happened there, but what it represents. It stands as a reminder that places can accumulate power, memory, and tension just like people do. And when a building becomes a symbol rather than a structure, it stops aging normally. It stops fading. Mar-a-Lago remains alive in the public imagination because it never chose a single identity. It is a home, a club, a monument, a battleground, and a question mark all at once. And as long as those contradictions remain unresolved, the fascination will continue, along with the quiet discomfort that something about this place will never fully rest.